I was telling you about Christie in the first hour. Right now, you can look on TV. Greece debt crisis ripples worldwide. And it's not just going to be Greece. It's going to be other countries. What about our own country? First of all, have you noticed Democrats never, ever talk about the debt? They never talk about the debt because they create it. Though the Republicans do, too. Don't get me wrong. We've talked about that at length. But the Democrats don't mind robbing your children and grandchildren and future generations of all their wealth, all of their wealth, to acquire power today. And, of course, the Republicans don't do anything to stop it. They're the tax collectors for the Democrats. They raise the debt ceiling, we're told by the Wall Street Journal editorial page, while those of us who are objecting, we're the ones threatening the future of the nation and the government and so forth. That's not true. Here's an article, we briefly touched on it, from June 30th. Greece headed toward massive debt problem. Here's the one I meant to get. Here's an article, June 16. Government debt threatens to send U.S. economy into death spiral. Congressional Budget Office warns. Now, you read a headline like that, right? Isn't this worthy of a little bit more attention than it's received? Government debt threatens to send U.S. economy into death spiral. Congressional Budget Office warns. Rising federal debt threatens to choke economic growth within a decade, beginning a debt spiral that will sap revenue from government programs even as demands grow, forcing the government to borrow even more, Congress's budget watchdog said in a frightening report. Nothing. You've heard nothing. Compromise, you've heard. It's time to compromise. Or time to move on. Or let's talk about the Confederate flag. Budget cuts or tax increases now would help avert the scary scenario, leaving the economy far stronger than it otherwise would be, the Congressional Budget Office said in the starkest warning yet by the independent agency, that putting off tough decisions will only make things worse. The report, the first major under new CBO Director Keith Hall, also takes aim at some traditional liberal arguments, finding that government investment yields only half the return on investment compared with the private sector, and that money transfers to the poor act as implicit taxes, keeping them out of the labor force and depressing the economy further. Quote, the long-term outlook for the federal budget has worsened dramatically over the past several years, the CBO said in its dire report, blaming large deficits that piled upon Obama's stimulus and more fundamental changes to the economy that have caused Americans to leave the workforce in favor of government support. Now, this report underscores testimony that was given earlier this year by Boston University professor of economics, Dr. Lawrence Kotlikoff. Now, when he gave this testimony, I mentioned it to you. But his testimony it's striking. He testified before the Senate Budget Committee on February 25, 2015. About, quote, America's fiscal insolvency and its generational consequences. And among other things, I cite this gentleman in the second chapter of my new book, Plunder and Deceit. He flatly stated, quote, our country is broke. It's not broke in 75 years or 50 years or 25 years or 10 years. It's broke today. Indeed, he said, it may well be in worse fiscal shape than any developed country, including Greece. He condemned Congress for cooking the books. He testified that Congress's economically arbitrary decisions as to what to put on and what to keep off the books have not been innocent. I'm quoting him. Successive Congresses, whether dominated by Republicans or Democrats, have spent the post-war accumulating massive net fiscal obligations, virtually all of which have been kept off the books. And he explained that the real debt picture is far worse than the federal government admits. He said the U.S. fiscal gap currently stands at $210 trillion. The size of the U.S. fiscal gap, $210 trillion, is massive. He said it's 16 times larger than the official U.S. debt figure, which indicates precisely how useless official debt is for understanding our nation's true fiscal position. Here's the thing, folks. So much of the information the federal government gives out is baloney. It's a myth. So you don't get upset. So you don't start demanding that these things be resolved, like the unemployment rate. Fake. The debt figures, fake. $210 trillion. He said in 2013, the fiscal gap stood at $205 trillion. In 2014, it's $210 trillion. Hence, the country's true 2014 deficit, the increase in its fiscal gap, was $5 trillion. Not the $483 billion increase in official debt reported by the CBO. Now, what's left to compromise on that, folks? What's left to compromise on that? Nothing. And he said U.S. post-war generational policy is accurately characterized as take-as-you-go. Over the decades, Republican and Democratic Congresses and administrations have taken ever larger amounts of resources from young workers and transferred them to old retirees. The resources taken from the young and given to the old were called in the main taxes. And the young were effectively told, don't worry, we're calling these resource taxes, but when you're old, you'll receive massive transfer payments too. Which, of course, they won't, because the Social Security trustees have said Social Security is tanking. The Medicare and Medicaid trustees have said those programs are tanking. Now, this is the number one issue of our day, which gets almost no attention. Oh, it's over in Greece. Oh, it's future. Oh, it's 20 years from now. Oh, it's future. Oh, come on, raise taxes on the rich. This is the big issue of our day, because if our currency and our finances fall, everything follows. Then the civil society's back is broken. Then we're all back in the jungle, trying to find ways to feed ourselves and protect ourselves and care for ourselves. This is very, very serious, and the alarm bells are going off everywhere. And the Republican leadership, nothing. The Democrat leadership is not doubling down, it's quadrupling down.